Now, there are a lot of NPCs in Fallout New Vegas. Some are good, some are bad, some are imperative to the story, and others are completely useless. None of that matters to me, as today I aim to find out, can you beat Fallout New Vegas if everyone dies? A proper name for this challenge would be, can you beat Fallout New Vegas if everyone you see dies? You see, it's impossible to beat the game if everyone dies, simply because there are so many NPCs. By the time you finish killing some of them, more will have respawned. By changing the rules to this, the challenge becomes very possible, so I'm going to be using these rules from this point on. One more thing I'd like to mention is unkillable NPCs for obvious reasons do not count, because otherwise the challenge really would be over. With those rules out of the way, let's get into the run. As soon as I loaded in, I saw to the return of Egg, as no other person would be capable of completing this challenge. He may not be the same thing of beauty he was in Fallout 4, but he'll have to suffice. For my special stats, I drained Charisma, Endurance, and a couple other non-combat related specials before putting the rest of the points in Perception, Strength, Intelligence, and Luck. I'm going to be doing a lot of killing today, so I figured that I might as well max out as many combat skills as I can, just to keep things interesting. For my tag skills, I took Unarmed, Explosives, and Science, but I later changed Science to Guns just because it would be more useful. I honestly don't remember my traits because they weren't that notable. I think I took Heavy-Handed in Wild Wasteland, but I'm not sure. Outside the doctor's house, I went straight to Chet's store. I didn't want to kill him quite just yet, but I did want to buy a few weapons off him first, starting with the throwing hatchet, which I try to use on the doctor. He was the first person I saw, therefore he's the first to die. I say I tried to use the throwing hatchet on the doctor, simply because I missed a whole lot. I ended up just using VATS to kill him, but the damage had already been done. I then systematically took out everyone in town before speaking to Joe Cobb, accepting the quest for the powder gangers, and then killing them. After I was done with Good Springs, I decided to make my way to Prim where I could handle business there, so I did. On my way, I encountered Barton Thorne, who got his head blown off before he even got a chance to speak. Inside Prim, I made sure to take out every NCR soldier before taking out some of the convicts outside. I then entered the Vicky and Vance casino, bought a few things, and started shooting until everything stopped moving. Last to go inside the casino was Prim Slim, which just made it all the more tragic. Killing him was like stabbing me with a radioactive toothpick that's on fire, but it was something that had to be done. In order to appease the Tods, I decided to put on his hat and wear it for the rest of the run. I then cleared out the Bison Steve Motel, which is pretty easy considering, well, it's just convicts, and I've obviously been able to handle them up until this point. I then put the Legion to shame by marching straight up to the Mojave Outpost, and killing everyone there with nothing but a pair of knuckle dusters. It was here that I did something I've never done in any other playthrough, which was to kill Major Knight. I normally like to keep him around as he is a good source of repair, but this is kind of in the run where I realized that I'm not going to have access to very many goods and services, so I started sinking points into things like repair. Anyways, back to the massacre, I slaughtered everyone in the outpost before moving on to Nipton, where I did the same thing to all the legionaries holed up there. I also made sure to take care of boxcars and the rest of the powder gangers that were also there, because, well, the name of the run. Because I kinda wanted to follow the natural path the game sends you on, I decided to start making my way to Novak while I was here, which ended up working out for the better. To start things, I ran into Malcolm Holmes while I was here, which let me dispose of him in a timely manner. I also had a first run-in with the NCR hitmen while I was here, who posed a bit of a threat, but eventually I was able to take them down, mainly because I picked up a grenade launcher from some nearby jackals. I was also able to take out the Lonesome Drifter while I was walking around, so I guess that works out for me as well. When I got to Novak, there wasn't too much to do, as there are surprisingly few amount of citizens here, so I just killed Cliff, Boone, Manny, Ranger Andy, and a couple other nameless citizens in order to satisfy my bloodthirst. Still wanting to follow the story to some degree, I made my way to the 188 trading post as well as Boulder City, and cleared out everything that showed any sign of life. I'm not going to go into too much detail about every place I go, simply because if I did, this video would be like 3 hours long, and I don't feel like recording audio for that long. Instead, let's make fun of me because I am an idiot, and instead of going straight through Boulder City right down to New Vegas, I decided I'd take the long route and go through Sloan. It's a miracle I'm still alive. Nothing too special happened on the way there. I cleared out Sloan, ran into what had to be an assassin hotspot, seeing as every time I got there, multiple assassins spawned, and then got to the Gunrunners. The Gunrunners are in fact living, so I decided to kill everyone there, including the factory workers, the guards, and Isaac. Now, the robot is a little hard, as although it isn't technically living, I have killed every robot up until this point, but the issue with this one is I believe it's unkillable. You see, I can't get through the glass, and even if I use something like an explosive to damage it, it doesn't take any damage. Instead, I'm just going to chalk this up as an unkillable NPC and move on. This does end up working out for me as it does provide me with a stable source of ammo, so I am somewhat happy about this. After I wiped the gunrunners off the face of the planet, I went to Camp McCarran where I rode the monorail straight to the Strip. My first stop was of course the Tops Casino, for story reasons. The chairman's suits may look pretty good, but they aren't about to stop me from killing them, so I just wiped out everyone that came into my line of sight. Before I left, I gave the Ace Theater a performance they will never forget, and I made my way to the White Gloves because they were unfortunate enough to be the next casino over. The White Gloves ended up being a bit harder than most of the other casinos, mainly because they use a lot of melee weapons, which they can use to block my knuckle dusters. Luckily, I still have my grenade rifle, so I just fired some explosives into the crowd, which ended up resulting with me getting my limbs blown off a few more times than I'm comfortable with. Forget Einstein and his definition of insanity, it worked after the 5th attempt, and I was able to clear out the rest of the White Gloves without very many problems. After the White Gloves, there's Gamora, as I'm kind of just going in order now, and they were probably the most armed, but not necessarily the hardest. Almost none of them used melee weapons, so I was able to charge them with my spiked knuckles in order to kill them. The real beauty about this is that their weapons fetch a pretty high price, so I was able to repair a lot of them, especially since by now I have the Jury Rigger perk. The last casino to be cleared out was of course the Lucky 38, as I wanted to save Mr. House for last. The Securitrons were pretty tough, but thanks to the close quarters they weren't actually able to fire off their grenade launchers, which means for the most part I was completely safe. I made sure to take Mr. House out with the golden gloves to prove a point, which ended up taking a lot longer than I expected. Keep in mind I have an unarmed skill of 100 right now. Once all the casinos were cleared out, I took the time to clear out the rest of the Strip, by which I mean I wiped out everyone that was on the street, before taking the fight to the NCR embassy. To be fair, the NCR police officers took me out more times than anybody else in the Strip. I'm not exactly sure why, they're not strong or anything, they just kept managing to kill me somehow. Finishing off the embassy marked the last area in the Strip, so I was ready to move on to my next target, which was of course Freeside. Now the only threat that's in Freeside is pretty much just the Silver Rush, seeing as their plasma weapons could easily kill me. The good news is all the guards will sort of clump up if you attack one of them, so I just shot the crier and then every single guard from the Silver Rush rushed out of the exit, straight into a couple shots from my grenade rifle. This literally killed every single one of them, so I was able to go inside the Silver Rush, finish off the remaining thugs, and pretty much steal whatever I wanted. Not that I could get much use out of it though, because I'm not an energy weapons build. The Atomic Wrangler also has some guards, but the thing is they're nowhere near as strong as the Silver Rush's guards, so I was able to kill most of them with my shotgun. Those that didn't go down to the shotgun got to see my grenade rifle for a bit, but honestly, like I said, it was a pretty easy fight. The last significant group of people to go down in Freeside were the Kings, and not to be anticlimactic or anything, they were just the weakest people I'd faced up until this point. They all wore light armor, their weapons weren't all that good, and their leader didn't even have any weapons on him. All this mixed together basically just made them a super weak target, so I was able to take them down faster than everyone else. It was around here that the run went from me systematically taking out everyone I wanted, to just a full-blown massacre of everybody and everyone. You see, after Freeside I made my way to Camp McCarran because it was nearby, and I killed every single NCR person in there. And I killed every single NCR person that was in there. The main problem was of course first recon, but thankfully I do have a grenade rifle, so I just used some incendiary bullets to take them out. Inside the building I ran into a bit of a problem when I met Silas, who I can't actually kill unless I have a good reputation with the NCR. The thing is, I have already murdered so many NCR soldiers that I am not redeeming myself in the eyes of the NCR, so I am never going to be able to kill Silas. Now he is a killable NPC and I can see him, so I'm not sure if this fails the run, but I'm not going to count it because it's kind of like the Gunrunner robot, in that if I don't use glitches I can't kill him. I'm a moron because looking back all I had to do was do the Fiend mission where you kill all the Fiend bosses and take them back to that one guy while I was wearing an NCR disguise, and all my problems would have probably gone away, but I realized this a couple days after I recorded the whole video. The last person that would die in Camp McCarran was that guy named Contreras, who has a small side quest tied to him. Something I realized though is every time I opened up his trader inventory, he would crash my game. I'm not sure what was doing it, but it was consistent. It was a bit of a shame as he did have a grenade launcher that I wanted, but I'd much rather keep my save file, so I just killed him without taking any of his precious belongings. Now obviously I just crippled the NCR, so I decided I might as well go make things fair and take out a big one of the Legion's camps. The only one I could think of was Cottonwood Cove, so that's where I went. Now Cottonwood Cove was difficult for 3 reasons. For one, I didn't have a high gun skill, so I didn't really have any good long-range weapons. For another, all the legionaries there use hunting rifles, so that means they could take me out from a range. And the final one was that it was around dinner time for me while I was recording that, and I was starting to feel kinda shaky because I hadn't eaten yet. All three of these combined made Cottonwood Cove an absolute nightmare, especially since the most long-range weapon I had was a caravan shotgun. Now I did have a trail carbine, but the thing is I had such a low gun skill that shooting it was nearly impossible. I ended up just having to settle for my shotgun, so I went and cleared the entire camp out with it. Now I died a lot here, in fact it was the second hardest place to clear out in this run, but I eventually did it. The last person to go here, in case you were wondering, was Aurelius the Phoenix. It honestly took a stupid amount of shotgun shells to take him out, just because he was wearing a single helmet. Even though I came here to even the playing field for the NCR, I decided that the fort was so close by, I might as well go and kill Caesar. Luckily by this point I had eaten my dinner, so I was no longer shaky and I was thinking clearly. This meant I was smart enough to put on a Legion disguise and sneak all the way to Caesar's tent, so I didn't have to deal with the entirety of the Legion before I fought him. Inside the big man's tent, I just went full boomer and blew everybody up, and it ended up working out in my favor. The best thing about this was I was able to fully repair a ballistic fist, which made the rest of the fort much easier. The rest of the Legion at the fort didn't put up much more of a fight, so it was on to Nellis so I could deal with the boomers. Now something I'd like to quickly establish is I'm not evil, I'm just a monster, so before I entered Nellis I killed everyone in the Crimson Caravan in clear view of Jack. I am such a good person. The boomers themselves were intimidating, mainly due to all their explosives, but I was able to handle it with some tact. Originally I wanted to start with Jack so I could laugh about it, but I never actually found him till after I killed everybody, so instead I started with Raquel so I could get her auto grenade launcher. For that I introduced all the boomers in the Great Hall to my little friend, before I realized the auto grenade launcher was actually pretty bad and switched to my ballistic fist. I then went into each one of the barracks and killed everyone inside. Don't worry though, I didn't forget about the injured boomers that were sitting inside the hospital. By the time I exited Nellis, I actually got a few new weapons, mainly a Fat Man in good condition, but possibly even better, a missile launcher in perfect condition. Now you know who else has missile launchers? The Nightkin on top of Black Mountain. This is enough to convince me to go over there and wipe them off the face of the earth, simply so I could have more missile launchers. Unsurprisingly, the Nightkin put up little to no fight, seeing as a single punch from the ballistic fist is enough to take out most of them. Now Tabitha and her super sledge were somewhat challenging, but in the end of the day, unarmed is much better than melee weapons in Fallout New Vegas, so she really stood no chance. Now you know what's just a little southwest of Black Mountain? Hidden Valley. Now obviously I've already killed Veronica, but it's fine because I've also picked up a Brotherhood holotape, so I was able to enter and clear out the entirety of the Brotherhood. The main issue was of course the first floor, because I didn't have a high enough science skill to hack all their turrets. On top of that, since I was such a high level when I got there, every single one of the turrets were Mark V. If you haven't fought in a Mark V turret before, then you are lucky. Those things tear you apart so quickly you don't even know what's happening, so I had to be extremely careful when in the bunker. Thankfully everybody in the first floor was kind enough to group up, so I was able to take them all out. The second floor is of course extremely easy, seeing as 2 shots from my grenade rifle wiped out everybody in the command room, and a single mini nuke killed everybody else. I didn't even bother blowing up the bunker before I exited because I was so confident that I killed everyone. After the Brotherhood was buried underneath the dirt, I made the short jog from Hidden Valley to the NCRF to do the same to the Powder Gangers. Now I don't have too much footage from here, mainly because the day I recorded this, PlayStation servers were glitching out like crazy, so I could barely see what was happening. That isn't to say that I didn't kill everyone there. No, everybody went down. I'm just saying that you probably won't get any good footage from it, mainly because, once again, PlayStation servers were extremely, and I do mean extremely, glitchy. Instead of talking about the NCRF, though, I'm going to talk about Westside, which is a place I've never been in, besides in one other playthrough. As a matter of fact, I only remembered it now, mainly because I wanted to go get revenge on the Thorn for all that crap they made me do in my unique only run. Now I died a few times in Westside, mainly because I'd get distracted by taking out some citizens or guards, and then me and SOB would go and charge me. He had a super sledge which hit for quite a bit of damage, so he was more than a match for me. I was smart enough to eventually figure out that he was the issue, so I targeted him first and then cleared out the entirety of Westside. The guards there are pretty much the same as the guards at the Atomic Wrangler, just with slightly worse weapons, so they really stood no chance. The Thorn was a bit worse, mainly because the guards there, although lacking in armor, do all have hunting rifles and hunting shotguns, which do a fair amount of damage. Sadly, their light armor betrays them, however, as I'm able to use a shotgun to destroy them very, very quickly. For a minute, I thought I got stuck in the thorn, seeing as I fell into the little cage at the bottom, but eventually I figured out there was an exit I could leave through. Now, by this point, I started to feel like I was running out of areas to genocide. Now, you could probably think of a ton that I haven't shown in this video, but keep in mind I have been going and killing everybody in certain areas and just not showing it for the sake of time. One of the last notable places I went and cleared out was Jacobstown, and the mutants there were honestly underwhelming. They were way weaker than the mutants over in Black Mountain, seeing as the strongest of them only carried hunting rifles, where the strongest mutants in Black Mountain would almost always carry something like an incinerator or rocket launcher. I did, however, do their entirety of their questline, both so I could kill the mercenaries that come after them, and also because I thought Dr. Henry would become, well, a doctor after I finished it, but he never did. The Night Stalkers in the cave were no trouble at all, seeing as I could just keep swinging my ballistic fist, and it would eventually kill all of them. I did get Oh Baby, a really good melee weapon while I was here, but sadly I didn't have any good melee weapon skills yet, so I just ignored it. At the end of the quest, Lily and Keen butted heads for a bit before I killed Keen, and then informed Dr. Henry that I killed him. After I found out he wasn't actually a doctor, I blew Henry's head off, and began killing every single mutant in the area. As I mentioned, they were weaker than the Nightkin inside Black Mountain, so they really couldn't stop me. After quite a bit of wandering, I found Camp Gulf, the NCR camp that has all the NCR Rangers, and so I decided that they'd be my next victims. To be fair to them, they were the single strongest thing I had faced in the entirety of this run. Now, the Rangers that were outside were tough, but to be fair, I had cover the entire time, so I was able to outsnipe most of them. Inside the building, however, I faced a much more difficult task. There were about 8 Rangers, all with either a brush gun or anti-material rifle, both of which could kill me in a single shot, scattered throughout the first room. Now, they weren't all in close quarters, some of them were, but not all, so I couldn't even kill them all with a single missile. On top of that, each Ranger needed a whole missile to one-shot them, and I'm not talking about one just blowing up in their area, I mean the missile actually had to make contact. Now, I died in here a lot more times than I care to admit, but eventually I was able to break the area down into a bit of a strategy. The only weapon I had that could actually take them out was Annabelle, the legendary missile launcher I got from the Nightkin, so I saw that as my only option. A single missile would go into the room that was kind of like a pocket, as there were 2 NCR Rangers in there. If I used VATS, I could insta-kill one of them, and outside of VATS I could launch another missile, which would kill the second Ranger. I then would have to turn left immediately, launch another missile, killing the Ranger on my left that would now be approaching me, and then take a doctor's bag and forced impacts in order to heal me to the point where I could take a hit, and heal all my limbs. I then would need to launch another missile in VATS at the Ranger that was coming down the stairs, and then turn around and launch another 2 missiles at the 2 Rangers coming down the next flight of stairs. After that, another missile would go inside the room with all the less powerful Rangers, and then I'd be done with almost everybody in the building. There were still a couple more sleeping Rangers, but luckily they were more scattered than the first one, so I was able to take them out with my ballistic fist. Now, that was the biggest headache in the entirety of this run, and I ended up burning through most of my supplies while going through it, but luckily I was able to get and fully repair a suit of NCR combat armor. Now, the whole reason I came here now was that I wanted an NCR disguise so I could go inside Hoover Dam and hopefully buy some supplies from Quartermaster Barden. Before I did this, however, I stopped with the gun runners and had to pick up a silenced pistol, because Rangers can see through disguises, so I figured I'd just use my silenced 12.77mm pistol to take out all the Rangers. This worked wonders, seeing as the pistol could one-shot almost every NCR individual inside Hoover Dam, except for the heavies, mind you, so I figured it would be an excellent addition to my weapons. Now, I am of course a fool, as Quartermaster Barden needs either a speech check or a high reputation with the NCR in order to trade with him. I have neither, so unfortunately I just murdered him and got ready to wipe out everybody inside the Hoover Dam. I like to think of this as the first battle of Hoover Dam, because surely I put up more of a fight than the Legion. Every single soldier on the bottom floor of the dam would go down to a single bullet from the 12.77mm pistol, so the only issue I had was trying to actually get them to get hit by the gun. On the next floor, I played a game of pin the shotgun on the engineer, as I blasted each one of the engineers to Kingdom Come. Now, the Visitor Center was a different story, however. The NCR heavies could do a hefty amount of damage with their super sledges, and also there were a lot of normal NCR troopers with both sniper rifles and riot shotguns. Both of these do some very, very good damage, so I had to be very careful to keep my distance, but also not go far enough where I can't actually damage them. The trick ended up being looping them all around the stairs, and then launching a couple grenades over there, and watching them all get blown up. I was also able to pick up a minigun for a bit while I was here, but I decided to sell it later. The minigun did see a fair bit of use though, as I did use it on all the NCR outside. Honestly, the whole thing went by faster than I was expecting, so now it was time to clean up the last bit of people. I say this like I only went to a few other places after this, but in reality I went to a lot of different areas and killed a lot of different people. I do want this run to stay within a reasonable time frame, however, so I'm just going to go over the more important ones. I went to Repcon and taught the Nightkin that stealth isn't everything, and then taught the ghouls the importance of skin. I then no-scoped Chris Haversam and was out of there before long. After that I went to Red Rock, which is normally a pretty big part of these runs, but was almost meaningless in this one, seeing as I wiped out the entirety of the Longhouse in less than 3 seconds. The rest of the cons didn't fare much better, so once again I was out of there before long. I also made my way to Nelson, which is somewhere I've never been before, and killed all the legionaries there. I also took out the NCR that was there because they sassed me. I then went to Vault 3, where as soon as me and Motor Runner locked eyes, I knew what I had to do. I disarmed him and then used his own chainsaw to cut him into little pieces. After Vault 3 I went to Camp Forlorn Hope and killed all the NCR there, then crashed and did it again. After that it was time for the sort of big boss of this run, as let's face it, Hoover Dam is going to be easy, which was Quarry Junction. The Deathclaws there were obviously the strongest thing I faced up until this point, so I was wondering if I was really up for the challenge. A single shot from the anti-material rifle from stealth was enough to kill the normal ones, and the Ballistic Fist was my best bet for the stronger ones. The one that gave me the most trouble wasn't actually the Mother Deathclaw despite it being the stronger one, but the Alpha Deathclaw. The main issue with that one was its placement, in that it could reach me from almost anywhere, so I had to be very careful when I approached it. In the end, a stealth critical in the back of the head was enough to kill it, so I moved on. Like I said, the last one I had to face with the Mother Deathclaw, but luckily I had a couple high explosive missiles saved up, so I was able to use 2 of those to kill it before it could actually reach me. After that, I claimed my prize of killing all the great cons that sit on the little ridge, and I was finally ready for Hoover Dam. Well, sort of. I still had to turn in all my quests to Yes Man. When I got to the top, some of them respawned, so I just killed them and then talked to Yes Man, where I informed him that I already met and killed all the factions. He applauded me for my work, then told me he was going to meet me at the Lucky 38, but he never did, seeing as I murdered him. I then went to the Lucky 38, where he magically was. He then told me I had to go to Dorito World, so I did. The El Dorado substation is never a threat, so I just sniped all the NCR before going inside, beating up the rest, and then powering it up. Once I was done with that, I returned to Yes Man, and got ready for the Battle of Hoover Dam. Using a mixture of a minigun, anti-material rifle, and marksman carbine, I was able to take out all the legionaries and NCR on the top of the dam, before moving on to the inside. On the inside, I just used my chainsaw or thermic lance I picked up later, and literally killed everything in sight. There were surprisingly few NCR soldiers there, mainly because I'm pretty sure the normal NCR soldiers that are there are the same ones that are inside the dam when you first enter. This means since I had already killed all of them, there were barely any. There were still quite a few legionaries, but honestly they're weaker than the NCR, so I had little confrontation throughout the entirety of the dam. Once I got topside again, I had to fight the Securitrons for kills before entering the Legate's camp. The Praetorians there all had melee weapons, so I was able to take them out from a range before confronting the Legate. Now, I had a bit of a plan for the Legate, so what I did was I opened with an attack from the Thermic Lance because I figured it would do the most damage, and then ran downhill. Unfortunately for old Lanius, he didn't see the C4 I had planted right on the hill, so as soon as he caught up with me, I used some turbo to get ahead, and then detonated the C4, instantly killing him. He died so quickly most of the other legion didn't get to come inside the camp, so I had to lob grenades over at them in order to kill them. After that, I approached the gate, readied my missile launcher for the final kill, and launched one missile straight into General Oliver, killing him and all of his men in a single shot. After that, I approached Yes Man, talked to him, finishing the game and proving yes, you can beat Fallout New Vegas if everyone dies. This was without a doubt the biggest New Vegas video I have ever done. Still, it was really fun. In case you were wondering, my final kill count was around 1,100, which isn't the most I've seen, but personally I think that's a pretty good number, especially since I didn't go through any DLCs. In case you were curious, by the way, my karma was neutral by the end of the game, as I kind of figured that would happen because of the amount of people I was killing. They kind of just balanced out. Regardless, that's all I have for today's video. If you did enjoy, please consider subscribing, otherwise I'll catch you in the next one.